An introduction to Judges. Who? Judges is the next in the series of books attributed to the Deuteronomist, although it seems clear that what we have contained within it is not one single narrative, but a collection of stories detailing the life of the nation of Israel in the years following the conquest of Canaan. The Deuteronomist has gathered these stories together and arranged them to make a theological point about the relationship between Israel's success and their adherence to the covenant. The judges, after whom the book is named, are not primarily characters concerned with upholding the law in the land, as their title might suggest. Rather, they're folk heroes who are given their places of honour usually as a result of their feats on the battlefield. Interestingly, of the 12 named judges, only one comes from the south of the country, which may suggest that the stories themselves come from the northern tribes. When? Judges covers the period between the conquest of Canaan under Joshua, which is usually dated at around 1300 BC, and the installation of the first king of Israel roughly 300 years later. During this time, Israel was a coalition of tribes rather than a unified country with a central government. We see in the story of Deborah that one of the praiseworthy traits of a judge was their ability to bring together the people, causing them to set aside their tribal loyalties to fight for the common good. The picture that Judges paints of the dispersed tribes of Israel living in a hostile land surrounded by neighbours resentful of their presence is probably pretty accurate historically. As we noted when looking at Joshua, the Canaanites were not wiped out and still feature as the primary enemy of the people, although new villains such as the Philistines have also emerged. However, the historical accuracy of the tribal living which is portrayed in Judges doesn't mean that the final form of the book was settled any earlier than the final form of Joshua. Like the first 2 chapters of Deuteronomic history, Judges was probably put together in the 6th century BC during the exile in Babylon. Why? The pattern of the book of Judges goes something like this. Israel worships a foreign god. God hands them over to their oppressors. Israel cries out to God for help. God sends a judge to liberate them. The Israelites turn back to God, but not for long, and the cycle begins again. In this, we will observe the message that's now becoming familiar, the Deuteronomist's theological understanding that obedience to the covenant will lead to prosperity, whereas failure to follow God's commands will lead to Israel being cursed. And this goes back to that list of blessings and curses at the end of the book of Deuteronomy. However, there's also another message that the Deuteronomist wants his reader to hear, and the book of Judges, whilst it doesn't state this message overtly, is certainly making a very strong case for it implicitly. As we've said, each of the individual judges brings about a temporary change for the better, but each time Israel rebels again, their circumstances getting worse every time. The tribes are not united, the enemies keep coming back stronger. What Judges is arguing, as well as the importance of following the law, is that the tribal system is broken. It doesn't work. The case for the failure of the tribal system is being made so forcibly because the book of Judges is setting up a defence for the monarchy, and in particular the Davidic line, which, as we'll see in the coming books, is being set up as the gold standard for the nation of Israel.